My first job after graduating from the university was in the public sector. I was deployed to Southwest Community Development Council, CDC, all the way in Jurong East, where I provided employment assistance to the residents staying in the Southwest region. I taught my clients how to look for a job, where to look for a job, what to put inside their resumes, how to prepare for an interview. Sometimes I even contacted the employers directly and requested them to consider hiring my clients. There was once I even accompanied my client down to the prospective company for her job interview. Overall, it was a very meaningful role because I was not just helping the individuals who are disadvantaged, but I was also empowering the entire family if I could help my clients to be gainfully employed. At the same time, it was a very interesting position for me because I get to meet people that were very different from me. Most of my clients were much older than me, and many of them only had secondary school education. I had met many ex-convicts and wives of convicts. And I kid you not, when I say that, I reached a point where I could tell a person was a drug offender just by the smell. I had also met people with mental illnesses, and I saw how difficult it was for a mental patient to find gainful employment. One client of mine, she has schizophrenia, and she told me that she will occasionally see human head flying in the air. At the end of my time there, I had met at least 600 different individuals. I am very thankful. Overall, I was very thankful for all the experiences because I got to meet people that were very different from me, which I otherwise would not be able to do so. All this meeting new people sounds good, right? But to be candid, outside of my work, I'm really not so good with new people. Some of you might remember me sharing that I am the floor manager at home. Somebody reminded me that, Pastor, I will always remember that you are the floor manager at home. But do you know what's my wife's designation at home? Do you know? Boss. Not quite, I'm the boss. She is the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Do you know why? Because she takes care of all communications with people outside the home. Basically, anytime that we need to speak to the neighbors, I will send her because I don't want to do it. I find it awkward to make small talks with my neighbors and sometimes even to say hi to them. Over the years, I made some progress. Like how in the last few Chinese New Year, I will walk up to my neighbor's home individually to give them ang pao. When I first moved in, I've never thought of doing that. Unlike my wife, who was very comfortable with engaging new people, I'm really not so good with them, and because left to my own device, I would prefer to mix with people whom I'm closer to. So this is a work in progress for me. If you have followed our Cultivate devotion for this week, you might have noticed that the scene has changed. For the first time in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus leaves the Jewish provinces and goes into Gentile territories. The word Gentile simply means non-Jew. So you and I, we are Gentiles. And Mark tells us that Jesus went into the vicinity of Tyre, went through Sidon, and went into a region of the Decapolis. These are the provinces, the areas around the Jewish area, and they were predominantly occupied by Gentiles. Up to our story this week, Jesus has spent all his time ministering to the Jews in Jewish provinces like Judea and Galilee. His ministry was going so incredibly well that it was crushing. The crowd was so overwhelming that even Jesus, the divine teacher, he was exhausted. He was constantly trying to find a place to rest, but people will always find a way to track him down. In our story this week, Jesus goes into a Gentile territory in order to get some peace and quiet. Maybe to us modern readers, that does not mean anything, right? Because for us, when we are burnt out at work, when we need to recharge ourselves, we too go into the neighboring regions, right? We go to JB, we go to Batam to find some peace and quiet through a massage. But But the Jews must have been taken aback by Jesus' choice of retreat because of a simple fact. Okay, Jews did not associate with Gentiles. I am too awkward to speak to my neighbors. The Jews, on the other hand, were too angsty to even stand in the presence of the Gentiles. Okay, yet Jesus did so for a purpose, okay, to teach his disciples and us, Christians, some important truths. Okay, now that we have established the background, okay, let's dive into our story for today. Okay, let's read from Mark chapter 7, starting from verse 24. Jesus left that place and went into the vicinity of Tyre. He entered the house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. So all these are Gentile regions. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears, then he spat and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven with a deep sigh. He said to him, Ephphatha, which means, be open. At this, the man's ear will open, his tongue will loose, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Okay, this story must have been so shocking to the Jews, because not only did Jesus went into the Gentile territories, he even spoke and touched them. Okay, and I think that's the effect that Mark wants to create. Okay, remember in the first line of his gospel, okay, Mark chapter 1, he wrote the good news about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. Okay, and what Mark wants to tell his reader is that Jesus is not just the Messiah of the Jews. He is the Savior of the world. God has extended mercy to people of every nation, tribe, and tongue. Okay, so today from this story, I want to share with you 3 truths about God's heartbeat towards people and how it should compel us to love people that are different from us. Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready? Yes. Okay, let's get started. Okay, the first truth is this: God shows no favoritism. Okay, let me start by making a confession. Okay, one of the reasons I stopped playing many computer and mobile games is because they make me rage. Okay, for some people, driving in Singapore brings out the demon in them. But for me, playing games brings out the worst in me. Okay, not only were they taking time and emotion away from my wife and affecting my marriage, they also make me very judgmental and racist. Okay, I remember playing Mobile Legends. I'm not sure whether this service knows. I was playing Mobile Legends on one occasion, and my team was on the verge of losing. And the player from the opposing team, okay, all these are online, I don't see their faces. The player from the opposing team, who is an Indonesian, he began to taunt us. Loser, get wrecked. And that made me really fire up, right? So I typed back, at least we don't come from poor countries like Indonesia. Actually, I've said a lot more things on other occasions, but let's just stop at this one. I have repented to God. I have deleted the game. I have stopped making racist remarks online. Okay, so to all my Indonesian friends here, and to those who might be watching this recording in the future, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Why do people practice judgmentalism, like racism and elitism? Okay, if we are honest, we do so to ascribe more worth to ourselves, right? We do so to make ourselves more puffed up, to ascribe more power to ourselves. We lower other people to make ourselves feel better, to make ourselves feel superior. Okay, thank God that in Singapore, as Singaporeans, we live in one of the richest, the cleanest, and the safest country in the world. But instead of being humbled by God's providence for me to live in Singapore, I use it as a badge of honor to look down on people from other nationalities. In our story today, what is the big deal against Gentiles? Okay, to understand that, let's backtrack a few steps to get the bigger picture. Okay, in the Bible, Israel is described as God's chosen nation. Why did God especially choose Israel? It is so that they could be a blessing to others. They could be a blessing to all peoples on earth. Okay, and Israel was supposed to be a light to the world, to spread God's message of love and justice throughout the world. Unfortunately, like the arrogant Singaporean here, the Jews saw that the presence and the blessings of God as a badge of honor. To discriminate people, they are not like them. Okay, and we catch a glimpse of their judgmentalism, the opening scene of chapter 7, before our story today. Mark chapter 7? Yes, verse 1. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the traditions of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, and they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands? Okay, to give us a quick overview, in the Old Testament, one of the more obscure sections of the law that God gave to Israel is the cleanliness law, clean laws. Okay, so the clean laws were meant to distinguish Israel from the surrounding nation. Okay, and to remind them, the Israelites, that they must not come before God unprepared and unpurified. Okay, the law makes it clear that being unclean is not the same as sinful. Okay, although sometimes these two categories did overlap. Okay, there were many things that could make somebody unclean in part of normal daily life. Okay, like such as burying your relatives or a woman going through a menstrual cycle. Okay, the clean laws not only identify what will make a person unclean, but also how to bring them from a state of uncleanness to being clean. Okay, so uncleanness, right? It was almost always a temporary state. Okay, once a person has been made clean, they could visit and offer their sacrifices at the temple again without violating the presence of God. And so the clean laws were meant to be visual aids, illustration, right? To remind people that they needed not just to go to God, but they also needed to repent, to be cleansed of their sins. However, the Pharisees did not see the clean laws as how God had intended, visual aids for us to repent. Rather, they saw the laws as ways they can do to make themselves more acceptable to God. Wow, I go wash my hand. How come you never wash? Oh, God must love me more. Now, you can begin to see what is the big deal against the Gentiles. Because the Gentiles did not live according to the Jewish law and practices, the Jews saw them as unclean people. If you want to make sure that you are clean and acceptable to God, you should not eat with Gentiles, you should not talk to them, or even stand in their presence. But Jesus rebuked the Pharisees, and corrected them that it is not a thing that goes into our bodies that makes us unclean before God. Rather, it is what comes out of the heart. Whether it is sin or holiness that makes us unclean or clean. And the clean laws were meant to point out the fact that whether you are a Jew or a Gentile, you need to be made clean before you can draw near to God. So that was the gist of the argument against the Pharisees. And as soon as he is done berating the Pharisees, Jesus immediately launched into the land of unclean, the Gentile territories, as if to make his point. And I think the learning point for us is that we too, like the Pharisees, we have the tendency to lower others in order to elevate ourselves. Okay, let's just use Christians as an illustration. Okay, all the Christians here. Here are some telltale signs, okay, to help us identify the pharisaical tendency in us. Okay, number one, you are serving regularly in church, and you feel a sense of superiority when you interact with fellow church members who are not serving. Number two, you are quick to dismiss people who are not as committed as you as being difficult, or they are not serious about God. Number three, instead of helping a fellow brother and sister get out of a bad habit or a sin, you gossip about them to other people. Yeah, why he like that? I would never do such a thing. Number four, you deliberately avoid non-Christians, okay, outside of church, okay, because you basically see them as unclean. I don't want to be influenced by their wild and ungodly lifestyles. So, I only hang out with Christians. It is great that many of us are committed Christians. But sadly, we are often guilty of using our beliefs to lower others. You see, the goal of judgmentalism is the elevation of self. I think we can understand that, right? The goal of judgmentalism is the elevation of self. We lower others to prop ourselves up. But you know something? God is not a respecter of persons. He does not ascribe worth to you based on your pedigree or your portfolio. Just as how his mercy that was revealed through the Jews is extended to the Gentiles as well, that's us, okay, we should see that we are in no way better than the people we judge. Okay, God shows no favoritism, and we certainly have no ground to do so. So that's the first thing. The second truth about God's heartbeat towards people is that God cares for the frail. In 2018, many Singaporeans were enraged when photographs taken of a particular social study textbook, a guidebook, was surfaced online. Okay, and it was talking about socio-economic status. And they felt that the explanation given in the book about SES, social economic status, was too insensitive, inaccurate, and deterministic. Okay, for example, okay, if you belong to the higher socioeconomic status, SES, high SES, the book said you use formal English in daily conversations or at home. You play sports or tennis at an exclusive country club. You have regular fine dining at expensive restaurants. Number four, you travel overseas for leisure during school holidays. If you belong to the lower socioeconomic status, low SES, the book say you use Singlish or different dialects in daily conversation or at home. You play football or basketball in HDB estates. That's me, I play football. You eat at hawker centers or at home. Wow, that's totally me. I only eat at hawker centers. You work part-time jobs during vacation time to meet basic family needs. Okay, so all the low SES people, where are you? I'm low SES. Okay, all the high SES people, where are you? Come, don't bluff. This service a lot of high SES. I think many Singaporeans were upset, not just because they were being identified as low SES, but because class divide is highly sensitive, right? It's a highly sensitive topic. We don't want our children to form their identities based on their SES, right? The socioeconomic status, and avoid mixing with people that are different from them. Okay, in response to queries from the media, MOE explains that the SES-related content is part of the Living in a Diverse Society theme. And the aim of the syllabus is to help students understand not only the differences that set people apart, but also the commonalities they share. Okay, and and the purpose is to help them to learn how to cope in a diverse society. Okay, I think if we put that questionable social study guidebook aside, I think most of us will agree that MOE started with a very good intention, right? To help our children see that the society makes up of diverse group of people. Because the reality is that for most of us, we only interact with people that are like us most of the time. Okay, if you think about it, if you stay in a relatively new estate like mine, you mainly meet young couples. Okay, they are progressing well in life. If you stay in a condominium, you're surrounded by all the high-status people. Okay, and your basement car park is filled with expensive cars. If you send your children to a popular school, okay, chances are the parents you meet are the well-to-do ones. But if you get to visit estates that have one-room flat, okay, which I did back in my first job, you'll realize that there is a bigger world out there. If you get to speak to people living in those estates, you will see that even in prosperous Singapore, there are many people who are struggling to make ends meet. Some of my ex-clients were living in one-room or two-room flats together with 5 to 6 other family members. Some of my female ex-clients were unable to work. No, they don't have the capacity to work, support themselves because their husbands were in jail and they were the only caregiver to their children. Because the government has done such a good job in finding shelters and giving assistance to homeless people, we almost never see people begging on the streets anymore. Okay, but one downside is that when the poor and needy are out of our sight, they are out of our mind. I think for many of us, you might have been disturbed when you read Jesus' response to the Syrophoenician woman. Okay, let's read the part again. Starting from verse 26, the woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Oh, wow. Not only did Jesus ignore her request, she even implied that she's a dog. So heartless, so insulting, right? Wow, should have taken a video of him, post on social media, and get him cancelled. Does this sound harsh and offensive to you? It might be shocking to us, but in fact, it was not surprising for the woman. It might be shocking to us, but in fact, it was not surprising to the woman. The woman knew that no man, male, would speak to her in public. She knew that the Jews saw the Gentiles as unclean, filthy dogs. She knew that to approach and to talk to a Jewish rabbi like Jesus was already asking a lot. She would not have been too surprised to hear what Jesus said. So, what Jesus is saying here should not be offensive. Rather, it should be puzzling. Okay, it should not be offensive to the woman, but rather it should be puzzling because it seems to contradict everything he has said earlier on to the Pharisees. Remember, he told the Pharisees that it is not who you are or what you do that make you clean or unclean. Okay, rather, it is the state of your heart. So why does Jesus call her a dog and seem to keep her at a distance? And I think the key to making sense of this fact, making sense of this mystery, is the fact that Jesus uses an unusual word for dogs, over here. And the original word means puppies, or dogs that you keep at home as pets. So Jesus is not using the word dogs to insult her as unclean. Rather, he's using the pet dogs as a metaphor to teach a parable. So Jesus was sharing a parable here. Now, you don't have to be a parent or a dog owner like me to understand this parable. At every meal time, when the family gathers together, your focus is to feed a child. Right? You have to make sure that your child has enough to eat. Yes, the dog is important. Right? I love my dog. But if you can only do one thing at a time, you feed the child first. Okay, there is an order, right? Child first, dog second. And it's definitely not right to take a children's food and give it to the dogs. So, what does this parable mean? Okay, thanks to Matthew, okay, who wrote about this same encounter, okay, we get a bit more details. Okay, starting Matthew chapter 15, Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciple came to him and urged him, "Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." The woman came and knelt before him. "Lord, help me," she said. She replied, "It's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." Okay, once you read Matthew's account, it is not hard to understand the parable. Okay, for all 3 years of his ministry, Jesus focused and concentrated on Israel, okay, the Jewish people. He says to the Jews, "I am showing you that I am the fulfillment of the Old Testament and all the promises in it. I am the fulfillment of all the priests, prophets, and kings." And after his death and resurrection, he immediately says to his disciples, "Now, go into all the nations and reach everybody," okay, including the Gentiles. So what Jesus is actually saying here is that, look, I'm not here for you. Okay, I'm not here for the Gentiles. There's an order here. First for the Jews, then for the Gentiles. Now, this story makes a lot more sense. Okay, because even though Jesus was focused on his mission to the Jews, he was not indifferent to the plight of the Gentiles. He did not just tell them, "Look, just focus on the next life. Okay, if you believe in me, you will go to heaven. In the meantime, you just focus on that. Whatever you are going through, just tahan. Okay, when the goings get tough, the toughs get going. You can do it." Instead, Jesus, he was big into healing diseased bodies and setting people free from demons. His heart is broken by the brokenness of our world. Jürgen Moltmann, a German theologian, he said this: Jesus' healings are not supernatural miracles. They are not in the natural world. They are the only truly natural things in a world that is unnatural, demonized, and wounded. Okay, the Bible reveals that God will not totally do away with our physical universe at the end of time. Instead, he will restore it to perfection. Okay, and Jesus, the merciful deliverer, has already begun his work 2,000 years ago. He has already begun his work of restoration, and he will complete it one day. And in the meantime, those of us who are followers of Jesus Christ, we are called to carry on his work of restoration in this world. Okay, we need to preach good news as well as do good works. Help me out. Tell the neighbor on your left, preach good news. Tell the person on the right, do good works. You see, the good news is that God has given his Son to die for our sins, even though we deserve the very opposite. Okay, this is what the Bible calls grace. When we do good, we are helping to bring relief for the misery caused by the destructive nature of sin. And this is what the Bible meant by mercy. So preaching good news is proclaiming grace, doing good works, it's extending mercy. So how can you get started doing good works? Okay, one of the ways is to contribute your time and talent to help out with a charity or with a good cause. Not to get something out of it, but to align yourself with God's heart. Okay, you can volunteer to help out at Brighton Connection, okay, to bless the estate that we are working in. Okay, it need not be a long-term commitment, but like what I said earlier on, like we only mix with people that are like us. Okay, get started, because in so doing, you also get us to come out of our comfortable bubble and to see the greater needs out there. So, God shows no favoritism. God cares for the frail. Okay, maybe some of us are thinking, okay, all that sounds good, but what if I'm still grappling with the judgmentalism in my heart? What if I still feel indifferent towards the poor and needy? Thank God that He does not just lay on us moralistic expectations. Okay, don't condemn people because I say so. Okay, show mercy to people because it is the right thing. Instead, He gives us a better resource, okay, to release the judgmentalism and the indifference in our hearts. Okay, and we see that in our story today. Okay, and the third and final point is this, that God responds to faith. After Jesus implied to the Syrophoenician lady that she's a dog, she gave him a response that made him utterly impressed. Okay, let's read that part again. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. Okay, it is not immediately clear to us how Jesus was feeling, okay, in Mark's account. Okay, but thanks to Matthew's account once again, we get more details. Okay, verse 28, from Matthew chapter 15, then Jesus said to her, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed at that moment. Okay, this woman is one of the very few individuals in the Bible whom Jesus described as having great faith. Okay, remember, Jesus was always bashing his disciples, right? You have little faith. So if Jesus says that this unclean Gentile woman has great faith, then all of us better sit up, okay, and find out what makes her so special. Okay, remember earlier on we said that Jesus told her a parable, right? Children eat first, dogs second. Okay, cannot jump queue. This means that Jews first, Gentiles second. And guess what? She understood the parable. Remember, Jesus' disciples were always scratching their heads, right? Because they cannot understand what the teacher is saying. And that made Jesus really upset. But this woman got it immediately. And she even used the characters in Jesus' parable to reply him. Yes, Lord, it is not right to take the children's bread and give it to the dogs. But even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. She got it. She understood the parable and she responded. What's she saying? She is saying that, yes, I accept that I'm a dog. I know I'm not worthy to sit at the table. I don't deserve your mercy. And that's fine. But I know that there is more than enough on the table. Can you please give me some? How will you feel if a pastor comes to you and say, before the Almighty God, you are a dog? I think you'll be enraged, right? That's worse than calling you low sass. How dare you call me a dog? I'm not perfect, but I'm not a dog. You see, this woman does not say that. This woman does not respond, how dare you call me like that? She says, of course, I'm a dog. I'm unfit to sit at the Father's table. I'm not asking for that. I know there's enough mercy for me. Can you please drop some for me? And Jesus described her as having great faith. Okay, what then is faith? I think for many of us, we think of faith primarily as trust, right? Great faith means I trust God more. We say things like, I cannot bring myself to give more money because I don't have enough faith. Okay, I'm not ready to be a missionary because my faith is small. So what we are saying is that we still cannot bring ourselves to trust in God's goodness, right? So we associate it with trust. Yet the story of the Syrophoenician woman tells us that there's a flip side to the same coin. Faith is to completely accept your unworthiness and to wholly trust in God's goodness. Okay, faith is to completely accept your unworthiness and to wholly trust in God's goodness. Faith is to tell God, Lord, I am not coming to you on the basis of my goodness. I am coming to you on the basis of yours. Faith is to tell God, God, I'm not asking you to give me what I deserve on the basis of my goodness. I'm asking you to give me what I don't deserve on the basis of your goodness. Can you see the difference? And it is so different, right, from how we normally pray. God, I did this for you, I did that for you. Can you please give me this? There's another story in the New Testament that captures the essence of faith even better. Okay, it's a little bit long, but I think it will help us understand faith at a deeper level. So let's read from Luke chapter 7. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was ill and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him. This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. So Jesus went with them. Okay, a centurion, very quickly, was an officer in the Roman army, which means that this centurion was a Gentile as well. Okay, notice how the Jews pleaded with Jesus. What did they say? This man deserves to have you do this because he did this and did that. Okay, isn't this how we are, right, in our personal, professional, and spiritual life? Okay, at home, right, we tell our family members, I have already done so much for this family. I deserve to get some rest and some respect. At work, we think to ourselves, or maybe we say out loud, I have already contributed so much, far more than all my co-workers. I deserve to get some pay raise and a promotion. In our hearts, okay, maybe we pray, we resent God. I deserve to have you do this because I am doing this. If you have ever said those things or prayed those prayers, you can listen to what the centurion says. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed, for I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. And that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. Okay, even though the centurion was a man of status, highly respected and valued in the Roman army, he completely accepts his unworthiness before Jesus. And yet, he wholly trusts in Jesus' goodness and power to save his servant. How do you think Jesus responded? Okay, let's find out. Verse 9. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him. And turning to the crowd following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith. See the connection? Gentile, great faith, even in Israel. Then the man who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. So how do all this deal with the judgmentalism and an indifference in our hearts? You see, the solution to judgmentalism is not promoting inclusivity. Right? That's the buzzword these days, right? Hire diverse group of people in your company or feature diverse group of people in movies. The solution to indifference towards the poor and needy is not promoting awareness, okay, like what we see in the social study textbook. Okay, all these are good, but they do not deal with the heart. Okay, the solution is to have faith in your heart. Okay, the Christian faith, the kind of faith that is commended by Jesus. Okay, to completely accept your unworthiness before God and to wholly trust in His goodness. The Christian faith enables us to say, I got no advantage. I have no advantage over those people that are different from me. I have no advantage over over the Indonesian gamer. I have no grounds to look down on them. At the same time, we will say, God has enough goodness for me. I don't need to lower people to make myself feel good. In fact, I have more than enough goodness from God, and I want to share it with those who need it. Let me close. This week, we heard about the unfortunate disaster in Turkey and Syria, whereby an earthquake killed more than 24,000 people, destroyed at least 6,000 buildings, and made at least 1.3 million people homeless. There were many videos of how little children were trapped in the rubble. To be honest, I didn't feel very much about the news. Okay, my heart goes out to the victims. Right, this week, I even sent out announcement about a drive to bring aids to Turkey and Syria to my colleagues. Okay, but frankly, I did not feel very heartbroken. Okay, I scroll through the news quickly like how I do for every other news. And I only realized my indifference when I received news from one of our church members that his newborn baby is in urgent need of a heart surgery. The doctor will have to lower the infant's body temperature down to 18 degrees Celsius, take out his tiny heart, put him on an oxygenation machine, while operating on the heart. And when I heard the news, my heart broke immediately. I felt so burdened for the couple, because of the emotional turmoil and the financial burden they will have to bear. I felt so heart pain for the baby who has to go through such an invasive and traumatic procedure. And I asked myself, what's the difference? What is the difference between the earthquake and the baby's heart surgery? Shouldn't I feel more for the many more lives that perished in the earthquake? Then I realized the key as I was preparing the message, that I have put myself into the story of my friend. Okay, I have put myself into the story of my friend. I cannot understand and fathom the terror of going through an earthquake. I cannot understand how does it feel to constantly live under the threat of an earthquake. But I can imagine going through what my friend is going through. I can imagine my own son being placed on operating theatre and going through the procedure. I can imagine the anxiety of waiting for good news and the emotional upheaval of receiving a bad one. You see, the way for us to grow deeper in our Christian faith is to keep on putting ourselves into the story of the woman. To keep on putting ourselves into the shoes of the Syrophoenician lady. To see that we are unworthy dogs, who need to throw ourselves on the mercy of God. At the same time, to trust that there is more than enough goodness on the table for us. How do we know that all these are true? Because on the cross, the child of God was cast away from a table without a crumb, so that those of us who are not children of God could be adopted and brought to the table. Okay, to put it another way, the child of God had to become a dog, unclean, rejected, despised, so that we dogs could become children at the table. The child of God had to become a dog, so that we dogs could become children at the table. And when you see Jesus Christ doing that for you, it will melt away all your hardness. It will melt away your judgmentalism, your indifference, your self-righteousness. It will make you fall deeper and deeper in love with Him.